Hey, hey, hey. Hey, hey, hey. Hey, hey, hey. What's up, 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 what's up?
What is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be going through this Bitcoin.com article, which is titled What is Bitcoin? Hopefully by the end of this video you guys should have a full understanding of what Bitcoin is, okay? Let's cue the intro. Okay, good morning, good evening and good afternoon, guys. As said in the intro, today we're going to be going through this article here on Bitcoin.com titled What is Bitcoin? So let's get into this. So overall, guys, Bitcoin was the first cryptocurrency, okay? It was the widely most recognized one as well. And as we spoke about in the last video, it enables peer-to-peer exchange of value in the digital space, otherwise known as the internet. And it uses decentralized protocols and cryptography to achieve this goal. Now, Bitcoin is a form of digital money, okay? And it exists independently of any government or state, so it's not controlled by a country or a government or a intergovernmental body, or even a financial institution for that matter. And it can be transferred without any need for a intermediary, which we spoke about in the last video, okay? It also has a monetary policy that cannot be altered by anyone, okay? It is set in stone and you cannot change it. Now, some people have taken this a little step further and said that it is a political, philosophical and economic system, but we will get into Bitcoin maximalism later on. But essentially, it takes the combination of technical features and it integrates it into a wide array of areas that you can use cryptographic technology and blockchain technology for. In this process, they make changes to the protocol. Now, Bitcoin is known for being the slowest at changing its protocol, as there are so many people using it that to get a majority vote, you have to persuade a lot of people that is the correct thing to do. And there are a lot of people out there that are traditionalists and they don't like changing the protocol at all. Now, people refer to Bitcoin as a monetary unit because it goes by the ticker symbol BTC, okay, as it is a cryptocurrency. Now, Bitcoin was launched anonymously in 2009 to a group of technologists on a series of forums to do with cryptography. And Bitcoin is now a globally traded asset with a daily settled volume of tens of billions of dollars. And its regulatory status varies by the region and countries, as it's dependent on where you live as to how the government sees it, whether they see it as a good thing or a bad thing, or whether they're not sure about it. But every country will try to tax it when you do make profits on it. Now, Bitcoin is most commonly regulated as either a commodity or a currency. Now, currency is fine and commodity is also fine, but what is not fine is securities. Cryptocurrency, well, Bitcoin specifically, is not a security. Now, Bitcoin is legal to use in all countries around the world. Countries have been banning and unbanning cryptocurrency since it first came out, so you just have to make sure that within your country at the specific time of you using it, that it is legal to use. Now, there were many people back in America when they decided to turn to fractional reserve banking and get rid of the gold standard for the dollar. A lot of people held on to their gold for years and years and years and eventually became richer because of it. So I'm not going to tell you what to do with your Bitcoin, but personally I would not sell my Bitcoin to anyone. But as it says here, in June 2011, El Salvador became the first country to mandate Bitcoin as legal tender. Now, this is important here, this legal tender part, okay? Because it means that it can be sold in the country as its sole currency, or rather than it being its sole currency, it is legal tender, so it is officially legal to use it in that country, and it is recognized as a part of the country's currency. So we're now going to go over Bitcoin's origin and its early growth and its evolution. So Bitcoin was based on the ideas laid out in a 2008 white paper, which was titled Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. Now this white paper here is the foundation of all cryptocurrency and blockchain technology to this day. There would not be cryptocurrency without this white paper, okay? And the paper details many different things, but as it says here, it allows any two willing parties to transact directly with each other without the need for a trusted third party. So we spoke about that in the last video of the blockchain technology, and it solved the double spend problem, if you remember me talking about that in the last video as well. Now this scarcity thing we're going to go into in a little bit more detail in a later video, okay? The author of the paper was named Satoshi Nakamoto. Now this is a presumed pseudonym. There is a man in Japan named Satoshi Nakamoto, but he swears on his life that it is not him who made it, and to be honest, we will never know for sure until someone comes out and says who the identity is and they can verify it. There have been multiple people who have come out and said they've been Satoshi Nakamoto, but they can never prove it. So until someone comes out that can prove it, unfortunately, it's just going to be one of those remaining mysteries. But they released the first open source software client in 2009 in January, and anyone who installed the client could use Bitcoin. Now the initial growth of the Bitcoin network was primarily driven by its utility as a novel method for transacting value in the digital world. Early proponents were by and large cypherpunks. So these cypherpunks here are the type of people we were talking about just earlier in the video, where they were posting a white paper in 2008, who were trying to solve the currency problem and making a digital currency. Now these individuals advocated for a strong use of cryptography and privacy enhancing technologies as a route to social and political change, and they used this Bitcoin technology to become a significant driver of adoption rate. The price of Bitcoin and the number rose in waves depending on the cycle of the Bitcoin and its price, but this happened over the decades. As I said, we are now 14 years into having Bitcoin technology, but there have been 3 halvings already, and we're starting the 4th cycle now. And a Bitcoin halving cycle usually takes about 4 years for a full cycle to complete. Now, regulators in major economies have already provided clarity on the legality of Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. Now, a large number of Bitcoin exchanges established banking connections early on, so the people who were in Bitcoin early made a lot of money because they are now able to spread it out to a wide varied range of people. And now you can convert any local currency to and from Bitcoin with as easy as pushing a couple of buttons. And other businesses established robust custodial services, so they looked after your Bitcoin rather than you looking after it yourself. Now, it hasn't been easy for institutional investors to gain exposure in America specifically, as they're not allowing ETFs to go through at the minute. However, there are ETFs in Canada and a few other countries as well, allowing institutional investors to gain exposure to the asset, as a growing number of high-profile investors signaled their interest. Now, more and more high-profile investors are going to come into the cryptocurrency space as things goes on, because it will be becoming more and more valuable as an asset. And when value goes up, people normally come diving in to try and get a piece of the pie. But Bitcoin, at its most basic level, is used for transacting value outside of the traditional finance system. So you remember me talking about that for a quick moment in the last video. But people that use Bitcoin make international payments that are settled faster, more securely, and at lower transactional fees than using the legacy financial settlements such as SWIFT. Now, SWIFT is what large and major banks use to transfer currency between different countries, which is why it takes so long, because there's a process on either side and then multiple clearing houses in the middle. We will go into SWIFT in a later video, but that's going to be one further down the line, because I've got a lot more topics that, in my opinion, are a lot more important to learn about in the beginning than SWIFT, okay? So as Bitcoin became more widely used, scaling issues did occur where it made it less competitive as a medium for exchange of smaller value contracts, because it became prohibitively expensive to settle smaller value transactions due to limited throughput on the ledger. So basically what that means is As the volume of transactions went up, because Bitcoin only has a transaction rate of 4 transactions per second, it could not keep up with the backlog of transactions it was getting. So there was a longer and longer build up for your transaction to be validated and put through, so the time it took for a transaction got longer and longer, even though the individual transaction was still faster. But the lack of availability for second layer solutions, we're going to go into second and third layer solutions in a later video. This idea and this problem supported the narrative that Bitcoin's primary value is more as an alternative to gold, or as in the intro card, digital gold. Now the argument is that Bitcoin derives from a value of combination of the technological breakthroughs that it integrates and is capped with a built-in supply maximum. So it's built into the code, it physically cannot get any higher. And that cap is 21 million Bitcoin. Now currently I think there's been 19 million Bitcoin mined, so there's only 2 million Bitcoin left to be mined in its entire history. However, the last Bitcoin to ever be mined won't happen until at least the 2100s. So we've got a long time to go, about 60 years to go at least, before we end Bitcoin mining. But at that point, I assume they'll end up going to proof of stake, and then at that point you'll start to be earning passive income on staking it to validate it instead of the mining of the Bitcoin to secure the ledger. We will go into all of this in a later video about proof of stake. But this is where the narrative comes from, and the thesis that Bitcoin could replace gold and potentially become a form of pristine collateral for the global economy. The other narrative for Bitcoin is that it supports economic freedom. So you can opt in or opt out of this form of money. You don't have to use it, but at the same time you can use it if you want to. And it's used a lot in countries that are in turmoil or in political unrest, where there is money confiscation and there is censorship and there is devaluation through uncapped inflation. So in places like Venezuela and places that are devaluing their currency to the point where you now have $100 trillion notes that are only worth a few dollars, it's just not viable, and these people need another form of monetary value that's actually worth something, rather than the government just printing and printing money all day, devaluing and debasing the currency with not really any ramifications for themselves, because they can just keep printing it and make themselves more money. And the people that suffer are the people who are working for a living and trying to make money when $100 trillion note won't get you very far. Now, Bitcoin uses blockchain technology, and we went through this in the last video, but we're going to cover it again here just to refresh it in people's brains and get a slightly better understanding. So we're going to go through these individually, okay? So Bitcoin is decentralized. So that basically means no one controls and no one can own the Bitcoin network. There's no CEO. There's no person in charge. Instead, it uses willing participants who agree to the rules of the protocol, which in this case takes the form of an open source software client. So people run the software client on their computer and they become a willing participant who agrees to the rules. And then I just spoke about this slightly earlier, but the changes to the protocol must be made using the consensus of its users. So if you are a willing participant, you are a user who has the ability to take part in voting whether they should change the consensus, which basically means that whether you decide to change the protocol or keep the protocol the same when people come up with new ideas for the protocol. But as it says here, users, node users, end users as well, so people who own Bitcoin, developers, so people making the new code or putting forward the new ideas for making the code, and then the miners as well. Now, exchanges have a bit more of a sway because they hold larger Bitcoin, amounts, wallet providers as well, and custodians as well for traditional finance. But because of this, it makes Bitcoin somewhat of a quasi-political system. So there is voting rights because you hold the currency. You can decide what happens to it to some degree, or at least you can vote on it. So it is a currency for the people, because the people as a whole decide what to do with it. But there are thousands of cryptocurrencies in existence, but Bitcoin is arguably the most decentralized, as it has the most nodes. but this attribute strengthens the position as a pristine collateral. Now, Bitcoin is also distributed. So all the transactions on Bitcoin are recorded on a public ledger, and that's known as a blockchain. We covered this in the last video. The network relies on people voluntarily storing copies of the ledger and running the Bitcoin protocol software. These nodes contribute to the correct propagation of transactions across the network, and they follow rules of the protocol. There are more than 80,000 nodes globally, making it impossible for the network to suffer downtime or lost information. And if Bitcoin is transparent, the way it's transparent is that anyone can see anything on the blockchain, any individual transaction at any time. So as it says here, the addition of new transactions to the blockchain ledger and the state of Bitcoin network at any given time means that whoever owns the Bitcoin is decided by the ledger as it is shown in a transparent manner according to the rules of the protocol. Now, I spoke on peer-to-peer briefly in the last video as well. So the nodes store and propagate the state of the network, but the payments go directly from one person or a business to another. There's no intermediary. The nodes just record what happened. They don't actually get involved in the transaction in any way, as this is no need for a third party. Now, Bitcoin is permissionless. Now, this means that there are no gatekeepers. Anyone can use Bitcoin and anyone can create a Bitcoin account. Now, all the transactions that follow the rules of Bitcoin will be confirmed on the network. And Bitcoin is pseudo-anonymous. Your identity is not inherently tied to Bitcoin transactions. So unless people know personally that your Bitcoin wallet is tied to you as an individual because they sent you or you sent them Bitcoin before, they're not going to necessarily know that it is you, even though they can see the transaction on the ledger. But instead, the transactions are tied to an address that takes the form of a randomly generated alphanumeric string. So it's a long line of text that includes numbers, digits, and also special characters. So all the weird individual characters you find on a keyboard. Now, Bitcoin is censorship resistant in that all Bitcoins follow the rules of the protocol and they're valid. Each transaction is pseudo-anonymous, we just covered that, and since the users themselves possess the keys, we're going to go into this in a later video, because you possess the keys to your Bitcoin holdings, it's difficult for authorities to seize your assets, okay? So if you hold the keys yourself, they can't take the currency away from you because it is yours and yours only. There's no way for them to access that if it's on a storage wallet. If it's on an exchange, however, they can tell the exchange to seize the currency and then you don't have access to that. Now, this is important for economic freedom, which is another key part of Bitcoin and blockchain and cryptocurrency as a whole. And as I've said before many times, Bitcoin is public. All Bitcoin transactions are recorded and are publicly available for anyone to see. Now, this virtually eliminates the possibility of fraudulent transactions. It also means that in some cases, by deduction, people reveal individual identities to specific Bitcoin addresses. So people can tie your address to you individually, and then they do know your transactions. So they do know what you're up to. Now, there have been many efforts to enhance Bitcoin's privacy, and some of them are underway, but some of them won't get through because, unfortunately, that's not the way people want to take the Bitcoin. They want it to be public and people to see it. Right, so now we're going to go over Bitcoin's economic features. So Bitcoin is a fixed supply, okay? And this is one of the key parameters of Bitcoin. Its supply will expand over time, however, it will never ever get larger than 21 million coins. We've spoken about this in brief before, but essentially 21 million coins is the capped maximum amount for the amount of Bitcoins that can ever be in existence. There will never be more and there will never ever be less. There will only ever be 21 million coins. Now, this 21 million coins makes Bitcoin a hard asset, and it's one of several characteristics that contribute to its perceived value. As it this 21 million coins creates the idea of scarcity and that there can never be any more. So with gold is scarce, but you can have more. You can always mine more. You can always find more. Even if you run out of gold on Earth, there's asteroids out in space that have gold on them. So Bitcoin was a unique investment perspective. However, there have been many copies over the years to try and recreate this. However, none have been exactly successful as Bitcoin. Now, Bitcoin is disinflationary. So this is not deflationary, it's disinflationary. Now, this means that the rate of the new Bitcoins added to the circulating supply gradually decreases, and this schedule is defined and built into the code already, so people already know. You can find out this information onto how many Bitcoins are being minted at any one time. And it started at 50 Bitcoins per block, and a block is every 10 minutes. And the issuance rate is cut in half every 4 years. So I've spoken about this in brief in the last video when we were talking about how many Bitcoins are in circulation and how long a cycle is. But in 2020, the third halving took place, and it reduced the issuance rate from 12.5 Bitcoin to 6.25 Bitcoin per block. So every 10 minutes, instead of there being 12.5 Bitcoin, there's now only 6.25 Bitcoins being mined. Now in 2020, so this is a little bit of an old article here, but at the point in 2020 in May, 18 million of the 21 million Bitcoins had been mined. So that was 87.5% of the grand total of the amount of Bitcoins in circulation ever. Now the fourth halving will take place in 2024, so we've still got a bit of time to the next one, and this will reduce the issuance rate from 6.25 to 3.125. And again, this will happen until the year 2136, when the final halving will decrease the block reward to just 0.0000168 Bitcoin. So that is 168 Satoshis. Now you're going to wonder what a Satoshi is. A Satoshi is one Bitcoin here. So one of these digits down here, after all of these zeros, is a Satoshi. So this is 168 Satoshis. Now Bitcoin only operates because it is incentive driven, because otherwise people would not want to be involved, as there would not be a reward. Unfortunately, this is the way the human brain works, and there needs to be an incentive, otherwise people will not want to take part. But the participants that do take part are known as miners. I've spoken about mining a lot before. But they're driven by profit to contribute to the resources needed for the network, and they secure the network. And this process is known as proof of work. And the miners compete to add new blocks to the chain. The hardware and energy costs associated with mining contribute to the security of the network in a decentralized fashion along game theory. I don't know if anyone knows about game theory, but it can become highly complex. But the hardware and energy costs are the main reason why people either get in or get out of Bitcoin. You can turn it off and turn it back on at any time if you have the hardware already. And this is to do with hash rate. We'll go into hash rate in a later video. It's quite easy to understand once you get the hang of things. But as it says here, the profit motive is considered to be important, as miners tend to sell their earned Bitcoin to cover the significant mining related costs now that the majority of the Western world is in an energy crisis. And the mining process is seen as a fair mechanism for widely distributing Bitcoin, as anyone can get involved in mining Bitcoin on your computer or any digital device for that matter. But it is a rigged game in the sense that because technology has advanced so far from where it started 14 years ago, there are now specific computers that are only designed to mine Bitcoin, whereas the computer you might be using instead is a normal computer. Now this is important here. Who decides what Bitcoin is? Bitcoin is not a static protocol. I've spoken about voting slightly before, but it has integrated changes available throughout its lifetime, and this will continue to evolve. There are a number of formalized procedures for upgrading Bitcoin, and the governance protocol is based on deliberation, persuasion, and volition. In layman's terms, that means that people decide what Bitcoin is themselves. Now, it is recorded that there have been significant disagreements amongst the community in the direction that Bitcoin should take, and with such disagreements, they cannot be resolved. These disagreements were so bad, and they were so different in where each group wanted to take Bitcoin, that they actually split Bitcoin into two different currencies. So they created a different version of Bitcoin. And this alternative version of Bitcoin is known as Bitcoin Cash. Now, Bitcoin will always be the original, and unfortunately, Bitcoin Cash has not really worked out. It's not a great protocol, and it doesn't really do anything. We will go into Bitcoin Cash in a later video, though. Now, Bitcoin Cash arose because it needed the proposal to solve scaling problems. Now, people don't like the fact that Bitcoin has only got 4 transactions per second. However, it can and has been updated along the way with the Lightning Network. But this has resulted in the rising transaction costs due to the increase in transaction confirmation times. Thank you guys for watching this video today. I'm going to hand it off to Carlos now for one final message.
So guys, let me tell you, I love
you guys. Yes, thank you for watching the video, guys. Hit that like button below, okay? And subscribe to the channel as well. Thank you for watching.